Good evening. I'm Alicia Menendez. A federal judge's frustration with President Trump's Department of Justice has grown as the Trump administration continues to defy her orders. The judge, Paula Zenas, gave the government until 6 p.m. Eastern today to answer 15 very specific questions and produce documents requested by Abrego Garcia's legal team. The government has not responded. Instead, they've requested a 7-day stay, yet another delay tactic, which Abrego Garcia's team objected to. On Tuesday, the judge issued a scathing order accusing federal officials of willful and bad faith refusal to comply. 3 separate courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court, have told the Trump administration that they needed to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Meanwhile, the administration continues to use similarly vague legal reasoning to target foreign students, terminate their visas, and imprison them. According to the Associated Press, the Trump administration has terminated the legal status of more than 1,000 international students at 174 U.S. colleges and universities. Yesterday, a delegation of Democrats went to Louisiana to visit ICE detention centers where the Trump administration has confined some of these students, including Mahmoud Khalil and Rumeysa Ozturk, both arrested for things they said or wrote.
When you disagree with someone under our Constitution and our rule of law, it's not illegal. We have protections under the Constitution that allows us to speak out. This is America. This is not some third world country. This is not some communist state.
Joining me now, Andrea Flores, Vice President of Immigration Policy and Campaigns for Forward.us, and Alan Orr Jr., former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Okay, so let me just get this straight. Alan, you have a judge saying you have to provide these documents to me, these answers to these questions, of which I would like you to sort of talk us through what it was that the judge here was asking for. And the government says, after not providing them the first time, we need more time. What does that tell you about the government's position here?
That they don't have a position, right? I mean, a little bit of this case is interesting to me because they deported him within 3 days. He was arrested on the 12th and removed on the 15th. And if they had followed the injunction of not removing any of the individuals, any of the 200 individuals on that plane, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. So that's really the problem with this case. And once again, it was within all the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is the person who let him remain in the country since 2019 when President Trump gave him the withholding of removal. It is the Department of Justice that told ICE that he could get it. It's the Department of Justice that organized the planes to leave the country. So they have all the information in institutions. It is the Department of Justice who's saying he's a member of MS-13. And they're asking the government to put up or shut up. And they're not putting up anything, but still kicking the can down the road. So it has been almost a month and some days, and there's still no evidence within the courts. So I don't think asking for 7 more days is relegated under the U.S. Constitution.
I mean, Andrea, I think sometimes when you say give us 7 more days in court, that perhaps sounds sort of bureaucratic. It is not bureaucratic to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is away from his family in a foreign land. It is not bureaucratic to his wife, a United States citizen, who is now having to care for her 3 U.S. citizen children by herself. There is a real human consequence to kicking the can down the road and refusing to answer these questions.
That's absolutely right. I mean, we're learning the story of this one individual, Mr. Abrego Garcia, and it's devastating because the government started out by admitting that they wrongfully deported him, and they have stalled every step of the way to bring him back. But I want to also, take a bigger step back and look at all of the individual stories that we haven't even heard about yet. We're learning every single day of a new family who's discovered that their loved one is in El Salvador, terrorism confinement center. I can't even imagine what it would be like to know that your family member, you've not been able to contact them for over a month. You don't know where they are. None of the processes that are normally available to families when someone is deported are available in this case. You can't look up their location. You can't send a lawyer their way. But that's exactly what the administration is looking to try and build out, right? They do not want to be subject to the Constitution and the laws that regulate, detention in the United States. They want to detain people away from the United States so they can treat them in so many ways as horribly as possible and separate them from their families. So the human cost every single day they delay the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia, but also the return of every individual wrongfully removed, is going to continue to grow, and it is becoming a human tragedy as we speak.
So let me put a finer point, Alan, on that human tragedy and make this bigger than Abrego Garcia. NBC News spoke to Venezuelan national Eduardo de Buenral, who entered the country in 2023. He entered through the CBP-1 parole program, about being boarded onto a bus Friday at a Texas detention facility set for deportation before that vehicle was turned around. In his case, prior to his detainment last month, records provided to NBC News show that he met monthly with an ICE officer at the El Paso, Texas field office. He said, "I've never missed a court appearance. I've never missed an appointment with immigration or ICE. The truth is, I don't have any criminal record. I've done everything correctly according to the rules of this country." And the New York Times reporting on another Venezuelan immigrant, Ricardo Prada Vasquez, who was picked up by ICE earlier this year. He effectively disappeared after his last contact with a friend in March, before those first 3 flights took off to El Salvador. Quote, "But Mr. Prada had not been heard from or seen. He is not on a list of 238 people who were deported to El Salvador that day. He does not appear in the photos and videos released by authorities of shackled men with shaved heads." This speaks to Andrea's point. There are families right now who don't know where their loved ones are. And yes, they are owed due process. They are also just They are due basic information about their loved ones.
And humanity. I mean, I think this isn't new to the Trump administration. Remember about child separation. There's still 500 children who are separated from their families with no contact to who their parents are. And they're doing DNA testing to sort of link them back. So this sort of treating immigrants as chattel when they're people is not new to this Trump administration. And it's the humanitarian concern that people need to step up and stand in the way of, saying, this is not how we do people. But in addition to that, this sort of rush past to justice is also something that's super important. I think it's an understanding that everyone understands that deportation is part of the immigration system, but do it the right way. This do it the right way crowd is always screaming that about immigrants coming to the country, but they don't want to remove people in the right fashion to give them due process, so they won't have this big receipt list of mistakes they have made in doing it in such a short time. And that's really the big problem here, and that's why they don't want to answer these questions in court.
So Alan, their argument with Venezuelan nationals is that they're using the Alien Enemies Act, which has not been used since World War II, to go after a single nationality, as Andrea often reminds us, one of the darkest periods in this nation's history. So that is one way they're going after this question. They are also then suggesting, in a different set of cases, that the Secretary of State has the right to determine that folks who are here, they may be here legally, are still a threat to this country. So we've talked a little bit about location and where they are choosing to hold people vis-a-vis El Salvador. But that's also becoming an issue where the government is refusing to hold people proximate to where they live, proximate to where their families are. So in the case of detained Tufts students, Rumeysa Ozturk, she was moved to 3 separate locations. That includes Vermont, before she ended up in Louisiana, despite an order from a district court that said she could not be moved out of Massachusetts without notice. Quote, "For nearly 24 hours, Ms. Ozturk's attorney was unable to locate her." I mean, I just got to stop there, Alan. As someone who has represented a lot of folks who might find themselves in a similar position, how unusual is it for your attorney to not know where you are?
It's unusual for your attorney to not know where you are, to not to track you in the system. But let's talk about this at the fundamental. Generally, many of these people would have been bonded out of the system. They are not a flight risk. And the concern is you want to deport them anyway. So on the basic level, if they do leave, so what? So the mere fact that you're holding them in detention is a human rights violation to me, in the time when they can defend themselves, because they're all students in all places. And Tufts University has already stood up proud for their individual, saying that she should not be treated this way. They are also violating her religion by removing her clothing and not giving her the appropriate medication. So the cost just doesn't make sense. So what are we exactly doing in this case besides making a strong statement that we don't care about human rights to certain groups of individuals?
So you have both of these sets of cases. And Andrea, I want to ask you, because you've worked on the Hill, you've worked in a presidential administration, you understand how political pressure gets applied. The fact that you have members of Congress visiting both sets of people, both flying to El Salvador and demanding answers, and then showing up at the facility where Ozturk is being held, bearing witness with their own eyes. Does that work? And in what way does that work, Andrea?
It's such a great question because it is so essential. Let's look at where we were just a week ago before Senator Chris Van Hollen took a very, very brave trip to advocate for Mr. Abrego Garcia. And you saw that set off new engagement from Congress. You saw then some House members, Congressman Garcia, they started advocating for others who were wrongfully removed to El Salvador. And so that type of political pressure, it does drive action. And you've seen before, in the first Trump administration, there was family separation happening, but when the public really paid attention, when Congress really took note, that political pressure grew so much that President Trump stopped that policy. Right? That is the goal here. And Congress should be going every single day, whether they are visiting those students who've been detained, whether they're showing up in El Salvador. They should be showing up outside of every detention center where they're preparing flights to El Salvador. These actions are just as important as the litigation continuing because they really show constituents that Democrats are opposing these absolute violations of constitutional rights. I know there are debates for Democrats about whether these are the right issues, but they have to lead right now and show when they go after the constitutional rights of students, when they go after the rights of individuals who have used the legal immigration system. Democrats can be the party of legal immigration. They're going after people who followed our rules and processes. That's what the story they need to tell the public. And you can't really lose when you're fighting for the Constitution. And I think you've seen Senator Van Hollen lead on that. And some of those quotes we just heard earlier from the Congress, the delegation that went to Louisiana, they are calling out, and that's incredible. And we're seeing it work in the polls. We see President Trump's approval start to dip on immigration, and it's opening up an opportunity for Democrats to show the alternatives.
Right, because, Alan, it's not as though they're using one stated rationale and applying it to everyone. They have sort of a Mary Poppins bag of rationales that is bottomless and that they continue to sift through. Because fundamentally, it would seem this is about, based on reporting, increasing their numbers. There is frustration within wings of this administration that they have not been able to meet their own stated goals on deportations, in part because they had no reverence for how this system actually works or the rights that are afforded immigrants in this country. And two, because testing the rule of law here is part of the point. They are seeing how far they can go with an undocumented immigrant. They are seeing how far they can go with someone who may have a green card, who may be a legal permanent resident, who's one step away from citizenship, such that they can then decide whether or not that is applicable to those of us who are, in fact, U.S. citizens. I just want you to pick up on Andrea's point. It is easy to frame this as an immigration question. It is arguably in some ways an immigration question. It is fundamentally a question about constitutionality and the type of democracy that we want to live in.
It's exactly about who we are. I mean, immigration is the thing that made this country great. If you think about it, is it also going to be the thing that breaks this country? And in this moment where we're talking about the individuals who are in El Salvador, let's not forget the individuals who were deported a month before to Panama. There are Asians and Chinese and African nationals that were just stateless in a jungle in Panama that the United States took there and dropped off with nothing. And they're basically stateless. That's also against human rights violations. So this is a drumbeat towards seeing what they can get away with claiming that people are lesser. And as I've said many times before, there are no levels to getting involved in the Constitution. We all have the fundamental constitutional rights that are protected here. It says all people. And as we grew to get up to that level, we need to live up to that level. And right now, what the Trump administration is doing, and Tom Homan is doing, because he knows better than this, he worked for the Obama administration, is flexing to see exactly how far the people will get behind him and say, you want to remove immigrants because they're the cause of our problems, rather than saying we're going to help immigrants because that's the thing that makes us great. The same money we're using to put these people in prison is the same money we'd be using to help them and build our society.
Andrea Flores, Alan Orr Jr., thank you both so much for getting us started.